Most people don't regret the house they buy in Tucson. In my experience, they regret the neighborhood. And the frustrating part is a lot of the time the house itself was perfectly fine. It had a good layout, good condition, and they got it at a fair price. The problem wasn't the house. The problem was that the experience of living there didn't match how they actually live from day to day. And that's where the friction begins. One thing I've noticed over the years is that Tucson isn't really one market. It's several completely different living experiences operating inside the same metro area. And the mistake most people make is assuming a house can solve a lifestyle mismatch. Two people can live 10 minutes apart here and feel like they moved to completely different cities. Because the reality is that Tucson isn't a collection of neighborhoods, it's a collection of environments. Some are optimized for privacy, some are optimized for convenience, some are optimized for families, some are optimized for retirement, some are optimized for recreation. And when someone tells me later Tucson wasn't what I expected, what they usually mean is not that Tucson was wrong, it's that the version of Tucson they chose didn't fit how they actually live. Let me give you a contrast I see a lot. The Catalina Foothills. Beautiful views, larger lots, privacy, elevation, quieter streets. A lot of people fall in love with that immediately, and I understand why. But the foothills aren't simply a more expensive version of central Tucson. They're solving a different problem. The foothills are optimized for privacy, scenery, and separation. Central Tucson is optimized for access, character, and proximity. Those sound similar when you're browsing through listings, but they feel very different 6 months after you move. Some people move to the foothills and eventually feel isolated. Some move to Central and feel like it's busier than they expected. Neither one is wrong, but choosing the wrong one for your personality creates daily friction that shows up every single week. Another comparison families run into frequently is Vail versus Oro Valley. And what's interesting is that these two areas are often solving completely different priorities. Vail is often a school first decision, while Oro Valley is often a lifestyle first decision. Vail can give you newer homes, more square footage, larger lots, strong school reputation, and for many families, that's exactly what they want. But the trade-off is often time. More driving, more planning, more distance between daily destinations. Oro Valley usually gives you more access to amenities, trails, parks, services, medical facilities, and a more connected suburban environment. But it often comes with higher price point and sometimes less house for the money. One choice optimizes for space, the other often optimizes for convenience. Both can be great, but they're not solving the same problem. Another comparison people underestimate is Casa Adobe versus Oro Valley. On a map, they look very similar, but they feel very different once you live there. Casa Adobes tends to be a little older, larger lots, more character, fewer HOAs, and more flexibility. Oro Valley tends to be more structured, more master planned, more consistent, and more predictable. Some people see freedom and individuality in Casa Adobe. Others see inconsistency. Some people love the order and organization of Oro Valley. Others feel it's more controlled than they expected. Neither perspective is wrong. The point is that the same feature can feel like a benefit or a drawback depending on who you are. I see this a lot with retirees and second home buyers. Green Valley is often viewed as simply a less expensive part of the Tucson area. But that's not really what it is. Green Valley is a retirement ecosystem. The daily rhythm, the social structure, the housing stock, the amenities, even many of the services, they're all shaped around retirement living. Some people absolutely thrive there. They love the clubs, the activities, the golf, the built-in social structure. Others realized later they wanted the Arizona weather. They didn't necessarily want the retirement-oriented environment. North Tucson, outside of age-restricted communities, usually gives you more flexibility, more mixed-age living, fewer restrictions, but it also gives you less built-in community. And once someone realizes they chose the wrong environment, changing it isn't simple. Selling after a year because the vibe feels off is expensive, both financially and emotionally. This is usually how the mistake shows up. A couple buys a beautiful home in a quiet Foothills neighborhood. 6 months later, one person says, "I didn't realize we'd be driving this far every time we want to go out." The other says, "I thought this was part of the appeal." Now, the tension isn't about the house. It's about the routine. And in my experience, the daily routine is what ultimately determines whether a place feels right or wrong. So here's a simple framework I encourage people to think about before choosing a neighborhood. Ask yourself, what does my life look like within a 10-minute radius of my front door? Not the house, not the view, but your life. This includes groceries, coffee, medical care, trails, restaurants, friends, activities. If your 10-minute life doesn't match how you naturally live, the mismatch usually shows up later. A lot of people shop by price range when they should be shopping by daily pattern first. The risk of getting this wrong usually isn't that you'll hate Tucson, it's that something will feel slightly off, and you can't explain why until moving again starts to feel like the only solution. Tucson rewards intentional placement, and it quietly punishes assumption. Most relocation regret I see has very little to do with the house itself. It usually comes from choosing a version of Tucson that doesn't match how someone actually lives. The goal isn't finding the best neighborhood. The goal is finding an environment that naturally is compatible within your life. At that point, it's usually not about whether Tucson works. It's about how you're approaching the decision and whether you're looking at the right things. If you're thinking about a move in the next 6 to 18 months, I offer something called the Tucson Navigator session. It's not a sales call, it's a conversation where we look at how you actually live. Then we work backwards to determine which version of Tucson fits that life. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is not yet, and sometimes the answer is that another place might fit better. The goal is clarity before you make a decision that's difficult to undo. If that's where you are, you can learn more below. Choosing Tucson isn't the hard part. Choosing the right version of Tucson is. Thanks for watching.